Commander, thank you so much for joining us at the Defiant Students Voice. So today we look to focus on the post-independence era, looking at the political and economic status as reflective from the student perspective. So your host today is Lifeline Guta, the national spokesperson of SINASU. As I highlighted earlier on, we need to look at the post-independence economic and political status as reflective of student issues. So we discover that now it's 44 years from independence, and there are a lot of issues that have unfolded in relation to issues affecting students. So taking back from 1980, the decade up to 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020, up to 2024. A lot of issues have evolved, a lot of issues have arose in relation to the political arena and economic arena. So today, joining us in this Defiant Students Voice, I want you to briefly introduce yourself and highlight briefly on your take concerning this topic or this post-independence era.
Thank you, Spox, for having me. My name is Libert Kodakwashe Amaoskwa. I am a student at Harare Polytechnic, and I am the Harare Polytechnic spokesperson for Zinasu chapter. As you mentioned that we are going to discuss on the post-independence in Zimbabwe, and we should firstly and say that. We managed to gain our independence on the 18th of April in 1980, and but from then a lot has happened, and which has affected students because we've witnessed a political instability and economic instability in our country. So as you mentioned that our post-independence, we have seen a lot of issues. So today, I think we can dig deep into how students are being affected in general, and not forgetting the general population of Zimbabwe, because it's not only us as students, but what affects our parents directly affects us as students. So thank you for having me today. I hope we are going to have a good time.
Thank you so much for this brief introduction. So as you highlighted, you said you highlighted the aspect that students, before we are students, they are citizens. So which means what affects the students from the post-independence era, it also affects the society at large. So without wasting much of our time today, I'll delve into the questions for the day. So my first question is, how can you describe the post-independence era politically, economically, looking at the status of this country is reflective of student issues? How can you describe it?
Okay. So our post-independence has been characterized by a lot of political instability and economic instability. Our political landscape has been characterized by corruption and authoritarianism. In also, there's the government have also tried to control the narrative, and by controlling the narrative, they've now tried to suppress every student who are trying to do activism. I can give you a lot of examples of students who have been arrested and being the victims of political violence only because the government is trying to control the narrative of our political landscapes. Our economy from post-independence era, we've realized that it's very unpredictable in Zimbabwe. It's so funny that somebody in Zimbabwe doesn't even understand which currency we use. We have a currency which is only recognized in Zimbabwe. I'm not an economist, but I can tell you that our currency is one of the worst in Southern Africa. And from that, you can already see that it has a direct impact on the students, because when the current is bad, the government can't even afford to support institutions. They can't even support students in our education space. So our post-independence era in terms of political landscape and economic landscape, our economy is based on a currency which is not recognized anyway. We only use it in Zimbabwe. So the government can't even support students. We have issues whereby students are dropping out from school only because they cannot afford to be in higher institutions. So that is our problem, because our economy is merely just an economy. It's run by people who don't know what they are doing. So as students, we are saying that we need something. We need a change in that space. We need an economy where students are recognized and we are seen as true stakeholders in this political arena.
Thank you so much. You have highlighted a lot of issues in relation to the post-independence era, but mostly you focus on the negative aspect of the post-independence era in relation to how it is affecting students. But from independence, 1980, we have 44 years now, and you can't say there are no positives in relation to what the government has been reacting to student issues. So, do you mind if you highlight some positive issues which you can quickly point out which have benefited the students? Because you can't say for 44 years the government has not been doing anything to support the students. So you can highlight on that aspect.
Yes, folks. We cannot take back as students. By back then, I wasn't in a institution, but some of the students they've enjoyed a prolonged period of good. We cannot say good, but it was better from what we have now. During the leadership of Robert Mugabe, he merely supported education. Some people might say that because he was educated, so he saw that education is the core center, is the tuck shop of our country. Education is the foundation, is the fundamentals to build a country. So he understood that concept and he managed not so well, but he managed to do something about students. I remember back then students were still getting grants, but now we have nothing. They claim that there are loans, they are helping students, but we are not seeing that because where we are now, we are building education in a sense that those who are poor cannot go to school, and those who are rich are the ones which are going to school, because we have a situation whereby we cannot really say that they haven't done nothing. They have tried, but students have become victims of try and errors. If you want to look at it, they introduced the new curriculum in 2018, and we as students, there was no consultation to the teachers. It was just an introduction of something that they just thought it was right. They didn't consult anyone. They just introduced something without any consultation of stakeholders in education. And students have become victims of those trial errors by our government. And so there are some positives. Yes, there are. But are those policies implemented well? That's a question. Because yes, they are doing something. They are saying that we have a policy, but are the policies implemented very well to suit education and us and accommodate students? Because they cannot implement a policy which would directly affect us and not consult us before implementing the process. So they have to consult us as students and then implement a process. If you look at 2018 when they introduced that new curriculum, it's a disaster, because if you look now, the O-level pass rate, that's last year, just recently, last year it was 28 point something. And the year before that, it was 29. So you can see that they're not going anywhere. The curriculum was just based on their minds and a group of elites who decided that this is correct without even consulting students. And in Zimbabwe, as you know, a lot of things are just done without consulting anyone. Even the ZIG that we are about to witness in Zimbabwe, they didn't consult anyone. They just introduced and say, we are going to give you this one. So I think that's where the problem is. Yes, they are doing something. We cannot take that away. And you should also take into account that they didn't just do something. It was the students which confronted them. If you go back to the era of Len Mojuda Jongwe, to the era of Nelson Chamisa, to the era of all those guys, all those revolutionaries, you can see that they didn't just do something, but the students stood up and said, no, we want this. They confronted what was there, and it's now different from now and back then, because back then there was a little bit of tolerance. If the students confronted, yes, they would hear and listen in a proper government, like the issue that you introduced recently of raising placards. We're doing our campaigns on Twitter and social media in general. But in a proper working environment or in political environment, the government should have recognized that the students are raising their concerns, and they should have accommodated us and hear our issues. But as you know that we are in Zimbabwe, they don't even recognize us. They just look and say, let them back and make noise and not do anything. So that's where we are. We're in a situation whereby it's very it's very draining among students, that we're now facing situations where I I can't afford school fees. I can't afford basic needs. A lot of students are falling under the poverty determined line, and you can see that where we are going. If I can't afford basic needs for myself, there is no way that I can be able to afford school fees, because now I'm trying to giggle behind how to earn, how to provide food for my family and myself, and then also think of school. And as you know that they are now introducing a lot of things in school, at university they are now introducing modular learning, and all of those, they're just trying
Okay,
and
but
errors.
okay, sorry, but before you go there, you've highlighted some positives from what the government has been doing in trying to respond to student issues. But we see back then, from when the government took this country from independence, 1980 to 1990, then from 2000 2010, the government introduced the cost sharing initiative, whereby it was saying yes, students they have to pay, but at the same time the government has to put something, has to finance the institutions. So we now see that the government introduced that initiative, which is commendable. Then, being given that we have got economic quagmires in relation to lack of current stability, and how this has become a sudden turnaround. Now the cost sharing, it started at 70-30%. Then later on, from the period of 2010, it was at 50-50%. But then we have now witnessed the lack of stability in terms of our currency. So can you basically blame the government in relation to this initiative? And yet you highlighted about 5.0, and you said this education policy is affecting students directly. But we look at this education policy, it was meant to try and resuscitate that initiative of cost sharing between the government and the students. And see, with this 5.0 education policy, which was introduced in 2018, it is focusing on innovations, on hubs, and on research. And from some of its implementations, which are still tried to be implemented, you see that they're trying to focus on research as a means or as a leeway to finance institutions of higher learning. What would be your take on that aspect? Say yes, the government introduced the cost sharing, but now it has introduced the 5.0 educational policy, which you have criticized. But can you pick some positives from that policy?
Okay. Like you mentioned, that the government, there was initiative to try and say they pay 50% and students pay 50%. But can we clearly say, in a situation that we are now, there is no economic stability. We have changed. We are changing currencies. I can't say. From my own perspective, I can't say we are changing currencies. We are just changing colors of papers and numbers. So in that situation where we are just changing colors and numbers of money, the government cannot really afford to support students in a 50-50%. As you all know, and as you are aware, even from Harare Polytechnic, institutions are now demanding their school fees exclusively in US dollars. And so in a situation where institutions are demanding their school fees in USD, so the government introduced 5.0. Yes, there were some positives in introducing that, but can we clearly say that the policies are implemented well to favor students? Can we clearly say that the economic favors those initiatives? Our economic doesn't favor those research in policies and all of that. We know that we're in a dilemma where students can't even afford to go on a proper attachment. We can't introduce something knowing well enough that we are in an environment which doesn't support that. We need to have policies which work well with the economy that we have. those policies, they are very good in a proper economic country, in a country where the economy is stable, in a country where there is a proper currency, in a country where the currency is recognized by other countries. So those policies, they are good policies. They favor us, but they are not favoring us. They're good. Their agenda is good, but they are not directly accommodating students because of other external issues like our economy and how it affects those policies.
Okay, so you're saying the education 5.0 as a policy itself is a good initiative in a proper working country, but in Zimbabwe it's not feasible. It can't be. It's not realistic in Zimbabwe. I've seen many students from the campaigns which are being done, that is education for all and education without barriers. They're raising a number of issues in relation to how this policy directly affects students. So we now see that yes, the policy, as you said, it's a good initiative, but it's not realistic in our country. How can you say it's not realistic in our country? Yes, we see the government all over. It has been moving innovative hubs. It was trying to emphasize on research as a way to finance institutions of higher learning. So how can you say that this policy is not realistic in this given Zimbabwe?
Yes. They are trying to introduce those research innovations and hubs, but in a country whereby normal and general students cannot even afford to buy data for themselves, it now becomes an issue where you have a policy which cannot be well implemented. They've been trying to introduce a lot of policies from 1980. It has been a try and error where they are trying to introduce policies which try and favor students, but the policies are not really accommodating students, because the policies, yes, they think the policies are favoring us, but before we go and fix the house, we need to fix the foundation, and the foundation is the economy. Our economy is the foundation of everything that we can do. The government cannot even afford to support students if our economy is based and not stabilized. So they have to fix our economy first before they try and introduce policies to favor students, because they cannot say that we are going to build a house, we are going to introduce policies without a foundation, and our foundation is our economy. So the economy is to be stable. We need to have an economy which is run by people who know what they are doing, not bogus old people who think they are doing the correct thing yet doing the south side thing. So we need an economy which is stable, an economy that can accommodate students, an economy with a stable currency, an economy whereby we are not just introducing numbers and new colors on papers, an economy which we can base, we can have a foundation to then build those policies like 5.0, which favor students, an economy which can accommodate all the students' needs, an economy which can be able to actually go back to those days where students were getting loans. But now you can't tell me that you want to give me a student loan, and then I have to pay it while at least I'm still in school, when we all know that there is no employment in our country. Those other people think that our employment rate is above 95%.
Okay.
So, but we cannot have a situation where we are saying we have 5.0 education, and then the economy is bad. They need to fix our economy first, then come and introduce policies.
Okay, well said, well said. You've highlighted a lot of issues. But you said in this policy implementation, students are not directly involved. And yet, I hear amongst the Zinasamandra, you say anything that is done which doesn't reflect the needs and concerns of students is not for the students at all. So it goes to my next question to say, as a student, what can be done to address the issues you raised from the post-independence era?
As a student alone, I cannot do anything. As a student, as you reflected, alone I cannot do anything. But as a whole, as students, as brothers and sisters, as sons and daughters of civil servants, as sons and daughters of vendors, as sons and daughters of those who are struggling to earn a living, we can do something. We should learn from the old Zinasu groups. We should learn from people like Len Mojuda Jongo. We should learn from the group of Nelson Chamis. We should learn from those groups and see how they handled situations like this. I'm not directly saying that circumstances are the same from then, but we can learn something on how they handled situations. As students, we know that our voice matters as students, but in what way does our voice matter? In what way can we improve our voice to be heard by the government? How can we draw attention from the government? Because the only way that the government can adhere to our needs, it's only when they can see that our voice is now having an impact, and we are all aware of what our government is afraid of. So that is what we should take advantage of and use that as a routine to say, hey, we need this as students, we are looking for this as students, and not just a sit and believe that the government will implement something, because we all know that our political landscape in Zimbabwe is characterized by corruption, and that alone is a disadvantage on students, because money that is supposed to be funded in education, money that is supposed to be taken and put in education, it's now the bank coffers are always empty, because there is too much of corruption in Zimbabwe. So we need as students, we need to tackle that at first. We need to understand and be clear on how to gain the government's attention. Yes, we have been doing a lot of campaigns on social media. We've been doing a lot of hashtags, a lot of posting of placards, and we all know that in a proper working environmental country, we could have recognized the students and be aware. But we can take for example what our brothers did in Great Zimbabwe University. We can see that what the institution, they only gave them attention because they went to the streets of GZU. So we should learn one or two things from that and see how we can move forward.
Okay, thank you so much. Then on another aspect, I've seen earlier this year, Zinaso petitioned the parliament, specifically the Minister of Education, in relation to how fees have been hiked. So it goes on to my next question. From this post-independence era, are there any opportunities for students to engage with the policy makers where their voices can be heard?
Like I said from my previous response, Spokes, we know as NAS we've tried to engage Morwira in a very civil manner. But as you all know, if you bring someone right now, any student will tell you that Morwira is very arrogant. He doesn't accommodate us as students. He doesn't take us serious. So we need to understand who we are dealing with first of all, and how he sees us as students. If we cannot really try and sit on a table with someone who doesn't even recognize us, someone who doesn't even appreciate us as students. Yes, we have tried, we have petitioned parliament, but we know in Zimbabwe, ministers have a tendency of just ignoring those petitions and not even going to parliament to even address our issues. So we should look at how we can deal with those situations. There are a lot of committees in parliament which we can try and conduct and see how best we can handle our issues with Morwira. We can have a sit with Morwira and see, but we know very much we are dealing with the regime that we are dealing with doesn't really accommodate those face-to-face conversations. They don't handle that well when it comes to students, because they always feel like we're attacking them directly. But no, we are not. We are trying to work with them and see how best can students be accommodated. But when we are dealing with people who are very arrogant and people who don't even want to accommodate us as students, there is only some ways which we know very sure that they will understand. So yeah, that's what I can say about that.
Okay, you have described Professor Morwira as being arrogant, but yet it boggles my mind when I relate to issues that have been unfolding previously. We have said that now the education system at higher institutions, it has now been turned into circus. It has now become a fiasco, which is more like a comedy. We have seen lectures being turned into political avenues for pursuing different agendas. Recently, the same professor whom we described as arrogant, he went to the Midland State University and officially opened, I don't know if you can call it a shopping center, but after it was changed from being a library. How can you respond to such an issue? You have said that the professor is arrogant, and we see him going there to officially open, maybe you can say a shopping center, which was supposed to be a library. Actually, it was converted from being a library to a shopping center. And recently, we are seeing that students, they have been complaining that libraries, they are now gathering dust. They have ceased to become libraries. They've ceased to become anchors of this education system. But now, instead of those libraries being like funded with the resources, being funded with the equipment, be it digital, be it the manual type which are used to, but now we see that those same libraries, they're now being turned to shopping centers, and you expect that same professor to understand issues to do with the students in relation to physics. How can you align these two things?
Like I said before, this only proves how arrogant they are, because they are now turning our institutions into their small tuck shops. Like you said, they are now turning our institutions into small tuck shops. So we as students, we need to stand our ground and be clear. There are things that we cannot tolerate. There are things that we should as students know that this is unacceptable. This should be acceptable. This can be tolerated. This cannot be tolerated. Things that directly affect us. You are saying that they turned a library to a tuck shop, and that is a violation on our education. They seem not to care about us and how our education is catered for. So if you turn a library into a tuck shop, what are you trying to prove? How exactly, what's your agenda if you are turning a library into a tuck shop? So the whole institutions are now turned into tuck shops, because they now want to control the whole narrative of how they run their institutions. So they cannot accommodate us as students. And I clearly mentioned that we should learn one or two things from our brothers from Mashingo. That the only way that someone can give you attention is when you fight them head to head. When you try and do something that they don't want you to do, is the only way that you can bring their attention to ourselves. So as students, we should learn one or two things, and we shouldn't be. It's our right. It's our right to express our concerns towards education, because those guys, they are not in school. We are the ones who are in school, and we cannot sit back and enjoy while they control anything without even accommodating us in those decisions making. So
Okay.
we need to be part and parcel of each and every decision that is something to do with students. So it's our right to express our disgruntlement in any way that we feel like that abides to law. We should take any route that we think the government will pay attention to us.
Okay. Thank you so much for highlighting on that aspect to do with conversion of a library into a shopping center. But we see from the constitutional provision that relates to our right to education, at the end of it, it says the state has to use the available resources for the progressive realization of that right. So, in this, well, in this sense, can you say now the state is using the same resources, is depriving students from those same resources, and it's now enjoying both halves of the cake?
My brother, Zimbabwe is full of surprises. We are all aware that in Zimbabwe, any funds can be taken for personal use. We have no funds which are allocated to students. Our bank coffers are already empty when it comes to student issues. There is no allocation that is given to students that can directly help us as individuals, and not saying that they give a certain percentage to institutions. We know that they do those things, but does it really have an impact on students who are disadvantaged? And when we talk about students who are disadvantaged, it's basically almost everyone, because almost all the students, they fall under the poverty datum line. So that is an issue. It's a big issue to students. And when they start turning things now, libraries to tuck shops, it's a big issue, because what's next if they're turning libraries to tuck shops? What's next? What for? How does that benefit students? Is how we are supposed to ask. If anything is done on institutions that we should be asking ourselves, how does that impact students? How do we benefit from something good being turned into a tuck shop? They are using funds which are supposed to be allocated on proper things. They are using funds which are supposed to be renovating and upgrading laboratories, and they're supposed to be upgrading buying textbooks, at least buy textbooks, than turning a library into a tuck shop. Because very soon all the institutions will be tuck shops, because they want to run our institutions like they are small tuck shops.
Okay, you said Zimbabwe is full of surprises. So just a point of interest. So you're saying at any time we can hear that the Midland State University campus in Harare, it can be turned into a hotel. Are you saying that it can be a possibility in this government where it doesn't consider students, or where it is full, it's a bag full of surprises?
Yes. In Zimbabwe, what's yours can suddenly turn into not something that is not yours. We can actually hear that our spokes, what used to belong to you yesterday is no longer yours. It's now state owned, and so that alone it's a crisis as students, because what is supposed to be for students is supposed to be for students, and it's our right, it's our duty as students, it's our duty as NASU to make sure that what's supposed to be for the students, to hold the government accountable for what is supposed to be for students. It's in our constitution. There is free education, but it's not just a free education as people say it. Free education comprises of a lot of things. It's not just only going to school for free. No, it's going to school where there is standard education. It's going to school where the government is providing what they are supposed to provide. If they say they have to provide this, they have to abide to the law, because we believe that nobody is above the law. That's what we believe in, but we don't know if that is merely true. So because some institutions, they're actually above, they look like they're above the law. If you look at institutions like Harare Polytechnic, they actually override what the court order said of paying RTGS, and then they continue to print their offer letters in US dollars only. So that we can already see, like I said, Zimbabwe is full of surprises. They will say something and do the other thing. They'll implement a policy and work on the other things. They'll implement a policy and not facilitate a policy. They'll introduce a new curriculum without even consulting the teachers who are supposed to teach the new curriculum. They'll just introduce the curriculum and say, you have to teach this curriculum. They just introduce Zig and say, you have to use Zig. So that's how full of surprises it is. Tomorrow we can wake up and we are already using another man, because that's how surprising Zimbabwe can be.
Okay, so you've just said that Zimbabwe is full of surprises, and from the post-independence era, we have seen that there have been a lot of surprises in relation to issues affecting students or affecting the society at large. Then you highlighted about how institutions they behave like they're above the law. Yet we are saying we have the rule of law. You mentioned about Harare Polytechnic still continuing to demand fees exclusively in the United States currency. But these are issues to do with fiscal discipline. How can you respond to the issue to do with fiscal discipline? I've seen Zinaso, we have been engaging into different forums, discussing on that aspect of fiscal discipline. How best can the government respond to this issue so as to make sure that institutions of higher learning, they stick to fiscal discipline, not whereby institutions they treat they treat their institutions like stack shops, like what you highlighted earlier on.
It's not basically up to what the government has to do, because we are all aware that the government they are in that they are part of that. Actually, they are the ones which run. We all know who the chancellor is. So the government, they are part of how institutions are run in this country. So it's up to us as students how we want to see the institutions progressing. We all know it's well documented, and the history doesn't fail us. We know that when students do go a certain way, the government tend to listen very, very carefully, because if the students continue to go in a way that the government, they are very comfortable with us going, the government will just continue doing whatever they want with us. Institutions, I believe, from what I believe, there is that institutions are part of the government, because they are the ones who run the institutions. We cannot say the institutions are, we cannot remove the institutions from the government. And we know, we all know that in Zimbabwe, when we mention government, we all know what we are mentioning. So that alone it's an issue, because institutions now are part of the government. So it's a concern, and when an institution doesn't abide to the court order, because we are afraid now. We don't even know where to go and report, because you know that they are not abiding to this, because they are standing somewhere. They know that even if you do this, even if you take this road, they will not do anything. So we have to look at which ways have been a much of a progress, which ways have they given us their attention. We have to go in that way, and not continue going in a direction that we know, and that the government is just going to sit back and say, oh, I'll let the students just make their noise. We have to do something that we know that if we go this way, they are going to give us their attention. They are going to hear our says and address those issues. So yeah, we are very aware when we say, how can we say, how can we include students in institutions? How can we make a Harare a polytechnic to accommodate students? How can we make a UZ to accommodate students? How can we stop UZ? How can we stop Harare? How can we stop all institutions from doing things from their own minds without accommodating students? We have to look back with sober minds and see which ways have worked before as in us, which road have we used that has given us a proper outcomes, which roads have we taken which have increased us. And with that, we have to be very conscious, because we know in Zimbabwe, the government, they try and control every narrative. So they try and suppress and oppress everyone who is trying to do activism. So that we have to look at what issues, at how best can we help every student, because NAS is for students, and we stand for what is right. And sometimes it's not what is right, but what is just, that we have to stand for. We know that this is right, but this is not right. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Okay, I want to narrow down our discussion for the sake of time, but you have described that students, Zinaso, specifically students under the Zinaso, they have to respond urgently to this matter. So are you saying how students have been behaving is like feeding the crocodile, hoping it will eat you
Yes.
as the last meal? So how then can you say students basically they have to respond urgently? To you have highlighted that our political arena is one which is stifling, it's one which is suffocating, it's one whereby democracy has now become a thing on the paper but not a realistic aspect.
Yes, we all know that's very true. I like what you said. Democracy is something that is on the paper, not in not actually in reality. But as students, we have to be aware that we have nothing to lose as students, but everything to gain from whatever way that we can take. As in us, we hope for a proper working country. Like I said before, in a proper working country, those campaigns that we're doing online, we could have been recognized because we were really making an impact on social media. It was really working. But in what environment does our environment actually allow us to do that? Yes, we are doing something that is very innovating, but is it going to really capture the attention of the government? And I like the sense that it will create awareness among students on what issues they are facing. But some students are now ignorant. People are now ignorant on what really matters to them. Students are now just focusing. You hear it's now, it becomes a slogan that the government will not, nothing will change, nothing will change, nothing will change. And that's the narrative that the government wants. They want us to just be comfortable with whatever they bring to us as students and accommodate whatever they bring. They need us. They want us when we need something to work. They force something on us, then they expect us to just take it well and work with that as well. So as students, we should not allow that. As NAS, we should not allow that. We should go back, like I said, and see which roads we have taken. We should do a self-analysis on our board and see which roads we have taken which produced good results. And if those roads are to be taken again, we are willing and very much available to take those roads in order to save students in general, in order to save the people in general, because what affects us doesn't only affect us as students. We are not in school to stay in school. We are in school so that we go into the country. We are in school so that we go into the economy. But if we are in school and we cannot change the economy, if we are in school and we cannot answer to the national question, if we are in school and we cannot deal with the national question, then we are just in school for nothing. We are just in school to waste our 4 years in school so that you just go home and pocket your degree or a diploma, whatever it is. You just pocket it at home and stay there because you didn't address the issues of the national question, which is high unemployment. And we have to address that as students while we are still students, because we want to end school and be employed at a job where there is proper wages. So that's what we want as students. We have to address those issues. It's not just necessarily just about are we having a good meal in the DH? No, it's supposed to be over that. We now, it's now high time we address those issues. The national question, we have to answer to that question, because we are the core center of our economy. As students, we are the generation of, and we are not supposed to just be the next generation. We have to be the today's generation. We have to start now. Whatever we want to do tomorrow, we can start it today. And so as students, we should start from now and build the now that we want to live in order to create a better tomorrow.
Thank you so much. So I've seen that education has been described as a key to success. But from what you've just said, reflecting on the post-independence era, looking at the political and economical status, those doors to unlock through education, we no longer have those avenues. You've highlighted about the issue of unemployment. You've also highlighted that the government is not doing enough to address issues such as fees hikes, issues such as lack of employment, enough salaries for our parents. So you've seen that all those things, they've escalated from being an institutional thing or being a provincial thing, but being a national question, which is saying as students, you have to answer to that question. So my last question basically is like, we have seen that the post-independence political and economic era, it has caused a lot of mental issues to students. Not only students, but I say students, they represent the society at large. We have seen parents that disturbed, some resorting to suicides, some have resorted to unknown means of trying to source out funds for their children to pursue higher tertiary education. So what is the government currently doing to address issues to do with mental challenges or we say mental instability? We've seen students, they've now resorted to drug abuse, and most of them, they blame it on these economic problems, on these political problems, which have failed, which have acted as barriers for students to realize their full right to education, or to make sure that education is accessible to every student. So remember here, we are not talking about the constitution as granting students or as giving students the right to education, but we are looking at a broader view. There are other things which are involved. There are other things which the government has to put in place. But in this case, we have seen now it has bounced back to students. Students, they're now being mentally challenged. Students, they're now facing mental illness, stress. Some of them, they pay fees on their own. Parents, they are now resorting to untold measures because they want to source funds for their students. What is the government currently doing to address these issues which are being caused by their lack of response to student concerns in relation to mental health.
Yes, yes. So when you are in a situation where you've you've been to school for 4 years, then you now stay at home without doing anything. The only thing that you can resort to, they are drugs, because you are thinking you have wasted time. You have been in school and there is no employment. You're just sitting at home. There is no employment there. There is nothing that you can do because the economy is very unstable. It can surprise you anytime. So in that, the government, yes, they have introduced a lot of policies that they are trying to cater for those that are facing mental challenges. But it goes back to my question: are those policies implemented well? It's not about just raising a policy and investing money in a policy that we all know that the money will be taken for not what is supposed to serve. The money which is implemented in those policies is taken by those political elites, and they use it for their personal use. So it's all about is the policies working right in serving Zimbabweans in general. It's not just students who are having mental problems because of the circumstance that they're in, but it's everyone having issues. It goes back to the youth in general. If you go outside now, it's a disaster because a lot of people, they have nothing that they're doing. People are just sitting at home, and when you sit at home, you end up resorting to other things, thinking that it's bringing you a comfort. But as NAS, we also provide a space whereby we don't encourage those things. We are against those things. We provide our awareness as NAS against drug abuse. So the government should introduce policies which actually work in an environment that we are. It goes back to the question that I said at the beginning of this, that when we have an economy which is in bad state, when we have an economy which is very unpredictable, it's hard to come up with a policy that actually functions in an economy environment like ours. It's the policies, they might have a good agenda but are not implemented well. There is no consultation in any policies that they implement. So that is an issue because the rise to drug abuse is not decreasing, but it's increasing rapidly every day. So it's an issue to us as students because we're having a lot of dropouts from school. And if you look, those dropouts, people are not just sitting. It's worsening our economy because it's either someone is dropping out to sit at home, and or it's either someone is dropping out to go abroad. So it worsens our economy. It doesn't do us any good if someone leaves our country and goes outside to explore what's outside. And we don't necessarily blame them because they can see that what is in our country is not favoring us as students. People start to be, it can be selfish, but we don't really say it's selfish because they are looking for themselves. They're thinking, should I really be in school for 4 years and still stay at home? Should I be in school and be at home for 4 years and not do anything? So people resort to measures that favors them as the youth of Zimbabwe, as the general population of Zimbabwe. And those issues are very critical. Those are basic things that if we had a proper government which has people at their core heart, those are issues that could have been solved long back. Because as you talk, we gained our independence in 1980, resulting in ending the colonial era. So that it's a long process, it's a long period to have those basic issues as a country.
Okay, thank you so much. This was Libert Moskwa, a student from Harare Polytechnic, joining us at the Student Defined Voices with me, the host, Lifeline Guta, the national spokesperson of Zinas.